Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. A very warm welcome from all of us on our first LinkedIn Live event. My name is Geert van Petegem, and I have the honor and the privilege to be the CEO at DocShifter. In the next 20 minutes or so, we will answer your questions on what is eCTD 4.0. Now, with almost 1,500 people registered today, it is very clear that you have questions. Our goal is to cover what eCTD 4.0 really is and how it is different, and also by when we need to do what, and potentially the impact on your operations. So I'm very excited to have Paul Ireland joining. Hi there, Paul. Glad to see that you've also dressed up for the occasion. Paul is currently our VP of Life Sciences at DocShifter, and he has more than 20 years of practical experience helping life sciences organizations globally with their regulatory solutions. And to give you a bit of a feel about what it was 20 years ago, this is what a submission looked like back then. A pile of paper. So if you are lucky enough to be young, not to remember this, and if you ever wonder what the first version of eCTD brought to the industry, well, it kind of meant the end of this paper mountain in this picture. Of course, after the session, in case you can't join for the whole of the session, we will make the recording available on our LinkedIn newsletter, Accelerating eCTD Submissions. If you've not subscribed to that newsletter on LinkedIn, please do so. This is a first, but it's not a last. So from now on, we will regularly host LinkedIn Live sessions on topics that are of interest to you. So please stay tuned. This is only the beginning. So again, welcome, Paul. Maybe it's a good idea to start off with what eCTD 4.0 really is.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. And yeah, unfortunately, I'm one of those people old enough with enough white hair to remember those boxes of paper. But obviously, just at a high level, eCTD 4.0 is obviously the next major version of the eCTD specification as set out by the ICH. Obviously, it's incorporating a lot of changes that have been requested from both ends, both the sponsor side and from the health authority side, in terms of improvements that they've recognized are necessary since its inception back in 2003. So it is based on the HL7 standard RPS and is designed in the future as well to support more product types other than just pure pharma. Obviously, it's intended potentially later on to support device submissions, veterinary medicines, and other regulatory products as well. So there's a number of changes that are going to be introduced as part of that, ultimately all of them with the aim of speeding up the regulatory submission process, enhancing how sponsors and health authorities communicate with each other, and hopefully, ideally, improving global harmonization of the format. eCTD, as it is right now, currently at 3.2.2, obviously has kind of differed somewhat a little bit between regions, and hopefully, with the introduction of eCTD 4.0, it can harmonize somewhat more than originally occurred with previous releases. So just at a high level, that's kind of what we're talking about.
All right. What makes it different from what we had before then?
As far as first point, and just to answer a question a few people have asked in the lead up to this, the content itself remains unchanged. So the content is going to be the same. You're still talking about the 5 modules of the CTD. So that content is the same. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Some of the changes really are around, you're talking one single XML file instead of 2 separate ones for the regional and for the common kind of modules, if you like, as well. And it kind of creates this flat hierarchical folder structure, unlike previous versions where you had all these subfolders, etc. It's really a flat hierarchical structure. And then through things like context of use and keywords, they're basically used by the viewing tools, etc., to sort of say where that piece of content should actually reside within that submission itself as well. So again, there's these context of use keywords that will be key to that. There's a lot of improvements that have been made as well about reusing content. So if you've got documents that you've submitted previously, you should never need to resubmit them at all. You'll get a unique, universal unique identifier, or UUID, for each document. And then once that document has been submitted once, even if you use it in other applications for different products, different procedures, you will be able to reference that UUID rather than having to ever really submit it again. So significant improvements in terms of avoiding having to resubmit previously submitted content. There's a lot of changes as well around the life cycle of the content. So things like the append operation have been removed. It's no longer necessary. We've got a lot of replace. Now you can do replacing one document that was submitted with many documents to many new documents, or many to many. So a lot of kind of changes, obviously, sort of a lot of flexibility, more flexibility now with the lifecycle management. It's also possible at a more metadata level to kind of rename elements that weren't possible previously, both renaming the documents, the metadata, to allow for easier corrections, if you like, from previously submitted information. STFs aren't needed either, won't be needed at all either. There's a grouping elements, grouping of documents, concepts that are introduced so that you can be a little bit more consistent between the different health authorities globally, rather than having some organizations, the FDA using STFs, other health authorities not. There's concepts that have been introduced that should help kind of harmonize the standard more easily across different health authorities as well. There's introduction of more additional controlled vocabularies to really help support the sharing of information between systems via the XML messaging. And those lists will be controlled by various kind of bodies, the ICH, different health authorities, and other kind of industry bodies as well. A key difference also is going to be two-way communication between the sponsors and the health authorities. So a key concept of eCTD 4.0 is that the ability to communicate backwards and forwards, and the communication coming back also being part of that life cycle as well. So a key difference, even if that's not going to be introduced by many organizations, health authorities to begin with, that is a key element of the specification, at least as well. A lot of that's great, but it does rely a lot, lean very heavily on technology as well to achieve it. So obviously, maybe talk about that a little bit more as we go. But those are some of the key differences, if you like, from what was seen previously.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Paul, for that summary. Why do you believe the move to eCTD 4.0 is such an important one?
Again, a lot of it is really around streamlining this submission process, you know, at both ends. So again, a lot of it is really, it's important because over the last almost 20 years with eCTD, there's been a lot of lessons learned and sort of recognizing that there are improvements that need to be made to sort of make that sort of process a little bit smoother at both sides. So really a lot of it is really aimed at allowing that to happen. And that two-way communication really should help improve the communication between the sponsors and the health authorities as well. So obviously that's an important concept to allow for that to happen. And again, really, it's an important one to allow for more harmonization globally as well. If you have different health authorities with slightly different requirements, it does make it difficult for the industry to move forward more quickly as well. Especially when you're looking to try and move to a more data-driven submission approach. It's still very document-centric, and that will continue even in this release. That isn't going to change. You're still going to have PDFs, coming from content. But obviously, there's a move and a drive towards more data-driven submissions, and this is laying the foundation for that. eCTD 4.0 is certainly aiding in that. It's certainly not going to shift and the whole dossier becomes data. That's not going to happen for quite some time. But it certainly helps with that. And again, the more things are harmonized, the easier that's going to be as well. Again, the key thing really being streamlining, though, speeding up that review process, if you like, across your life cycles.
Okay, thank you for that. Probably the question we've received the most in the lead up to this LinkedIn Live event is the question about timelines. There is a timeline, but it has changed over the course of time. Can you give us some insight on the latest of that?
Yeah, and to be honest, there's a table which hopefully can come up that kind of explains the different timelines for the different health authorities. So obviously they differ health authority by health authority. But the key first point to make here is these are obviously changing dates. We had this table already 6-7 months ago. after the RSIDM conference, and it's already changed quite a bit since then as well. So the first thing to point out is that it is actually live in one region. So it's no longer just, if you like, vaporware discussion. It is actually live in Japan. They are accepting optionally applications in eCTD 4.0 specification. So it's no longer just talk. It is live in one region. But there's obviously ongoing pilots at different health authorities. So in the US, between June and December, it was intended to be a pilot of this year. And then there are pilots planned in Europe and in Canada and Brazil for 2023, as well as in Switzerland also. So those are ongoing pilots. And then for Europe, it's obviously slightly different. There are different procedures as well, whether it's centralized, national, or mutual recognition or decentralized. The timings are different for when it's intended to be implemented. The target right now for centralized procedures is to allow them as an optional format to be optional in 2024, not till 2025 for MRP, DCP, and 2026 for national applications. So obviously in Europe it's a little bit more complex, and the timelines are going to be staggered somewhat as well. Obviously, a big part of being able to sort of submit is that the health authorities are ready, with the tools they need to actually kind of perform their review and to sort of manage the new types of content as well. And not everybody's actually kind of chosen, not every health authority's chosen their tools. Obviously, Japan has, clearly, because they're allowing sponsors to submit, but that's a custom tool. US most have, US, Swissmedic, Health Canada, and Australia have selected tools, so they're ready to go. Brazil, however, and Europe still haven't. So obviously there's some work still to be done just for them to be prepared. But again, there's the implementation guides are available for most health authorities, but there's still a few that are still finalizing those over the course of the rest of this year and into next year as well. But it's going to be some time, as you can see, before it's mandated. It's still going to be a number of years before eCTD 4.0 has, if you like, replaced the current version, and you can no longer submit in the current spec of 3.2.2. That's quite a few years out still.
All right. Thank you for the comprehensive overview, and we will make sure we make it available after the session. What do you see, Paul, as the main benefits for sponsor organizations?
Again, it's probably been a bit repetitive, but it's really allowing them to streamline this submission process as well. A lot of the changes are changes that have been driven, if you like, by sponsor organizations, things they found painful in their process today with the current spec. So obviously it's allowing them to streamline that process somewhat. And yes, a lot of the life cycle element changes and so on, all of that should sort of, allow for things to be done a little bit more quickly and more efficiently as well. A lot of less rework in finding documents that were submitted previously and submitting them again and again. Obviously, all of that just leads to a more efficient process overall. Obviously, the communication between sponsor and health authority as well is obviously a benefit to them as well, to the sponsor organizations. That two-way communication when it comes into place, because again, just to restate, the intention is in the initial implementation, a lot of health authorities won't enable the two-way communication, even though it's in the spec. A lot of them won't implement that to begin with. That'll be implemented in a second phase, if you like. But that, when it does come in, it will have a significant impact as well on how the communication flows backwards and forwards between sponsor and health authority. So a big advantage there. But also things like control vocabularies, sort of help achieve consistency a little bit more easily as well. So a number of kind of benefits on both sides, really.
Okay, and there was another question that came up frequently, and that was, will we need different content for a submission, or will it stay the same?
For the large part, the content again is the same. So the actual core content of the CTD is still the same. You're still talking about your 5 modules of the CTD. That doesn't change. There's obviously a drive towards more information being able to be submitted in forms of data that can then be manipulated and kind of questioned, if you like, questions answered more easily from data. But for the large part, you're still talking about a lot of PDF content, PDF documents the way it's structured and everything may be different from a backbone and table of content perspective, but you're still talking about individual PDFs for the large part. So all those problems you have in terms of making sure your PDFs are ready are still going to be there because they still need to be submitted in that format. There are some slight checks as well. So it's important to make sure that your tools are creating PDFs to meet the latest specs. There have been some slight revisions in the PDF specifications from the ICH, some changes to the image encoding options, for example, as well. But yeah, as I say, at the end of the day, the content's the same, but it is supporting a move towards some sections being more data-driven.
Okay. Finally, your final question here from my end. Do you see any drawbacks, any negatives to the move?
One of the first things is the fact that it will run alongside. It's obviously not just a cutoff point kind of globally where everybody's going to stop using 3.2.2 and move to 4.0. It's a very gradual thing with optional and mandatory dates being different and different by health authority. So it means for sponsor organizations, you're really going to be managing two slightly different processes. And obviously the vendors of the publishing tools and viewing tools are going to obviously minimize the impact that will have. But at the end of the day, the process is going to be slightly different depending on where you're submitting. So that's obviously going to create some, for a few years still, some initial drawbacks. There's going to be that slight confusion of, managing two different specs for depending on where you're submitting. There is definitely going to be a heavier reliance on technology, whereas before you could just open the submission up in a browser and kind of navigate through it, for example, for the large part, not always, but for the most part. You really will need technology now to build the dossier, to view it. There's a heavier reliance on tech, which some could see as a drawback, obviously as well. It's not really human readable without technology. You need a viewing tool. So yeah, building something by hand isn't really going to be feasible anymore, or certainly a lot more difficult. Because obviously all the vendors are actually updating their tools. Obviously, a lot of sponsor organizations are looking at, do they still have the best tool for the job, once eCTD 4.0 comes out. So there will be a lot of, okay, do we still have the right tools? Questions being asked. And also, if you are going to stay with it, it's typically going to be a major update to the technology that's implemented. So obviously there's going to be a major significant upgrade, validation effort involved in changing or upgrading those platforms, or potentially moving to a completely different platform altogether. Obviously, on top of that, there is obviously, as with any change, this is a more significant one. There's new terminology involved, and they seem like minor points, but obviously in terms of internal training and so on, there's going to be a certain training necessary for the publishing teams and those involved overall in the life cycles, to sort of get to grips with some of the new terminology of eCTD 4.0. And again, that's just a little bit more tricky because you still have the old kind of specifications still required in some health authorities. So you're really going to be managing two slightly different terminologies between specs. So those are some of the downsides. But just to kind of finish off, really the downsides really don't kind of outweigh the benefits. The benefits are by far greater to the industry as a whole. So there's certainly, even though there are some drawbacks, they certainly don't outweigh any benefits for sure.
All right. Thank you, Paul, for your clear overview. We do realize that we didn't answer, or we were not able to answer all of your questions, but we will make sure we keep our material updated and in our newsletter, Accelerating eCTD Submissions. To end off or to conclude, eCTD 4.0 is definitely coming. And while the timelines for certain regions still seem far out, at the age of 52, I've learned that time goes fast, so better start preparing now. Some of you might also have wondered who DocShifter is. Well, our software helps life sciences organizations to get their submissions out of the door faster. We focus on compliant rendering, easy report generation, and Word and PDF file validation. And we help pharma companies and life sciences companies, large and small, all across the globe. With this, I'd like to thank everybody for watching. If you would like to rewatch this session or want to grab a picture snapshot of the timeline, for example, we will make it available via our LinkedIn newsletter, again, Accelerating eCTD Submissions. The link is being shown right now on your screen. Again, it was our first session. I want to thank Paul again. I want to thank everybody that attended. We do look forward to having you on one of our next sessions. We hope to make them equally informative as we hope this session has been. And we wish you a very pleasant continuation of the day. Bye from Belgium, and take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, Paul.
Goodbye. Goodbye from
Bye-bye.
London.
Take
Bye-bye,
care.
everybody.